A man helped a desperate woman change her tire. The next day, a black SUV showed up at his house. It was an unremarkable evening when Michael, a man in his early 50s, spotted a woman struggling at the side of the road. Her car was tilted slightly, the rear tire flat, and she stood helplessly, glancing anxiously at her phone. Michael had seen this scene before. People stranded on the highway, waiting for someone to notice their misfortune. He had been the kind to drive by in the past, too wrapped up in his own life to stop. But something had changed in Michael over the years. As he drove closer, his heart stirred. He couldn't just pass her by. Without hesitation, he stepped out and pulled his old pickup to the roadside. This simple act of kindness felt familiar to him, yet different this time, as though the universe had something extraordinary in store for him. Michael's life had been anything but easy. From his earliest memories, life seemed like a storm that never passed. His childhood was a blur of harsh words, heavy hands, and endless nights crying into his pillow. His parents had never known how to love, or perhaps they didn't care. They dealt with their struggles through violence, leaving Michael to navigate a world of emotional and physical abuse. By age 10, he was already thinking of escape, fantasizing about a life far from the chaos that had consumed his home. At 13, he found himself in foster care. But those years weren't any kinder. The system wasn't built for compassion, and the foster families he stayed with couldn't heal the wounds inflicted in his youth. Misguided and alone, Michael drifted through his teenage years, making poor choices that only deepened the scars he carried. Drugs became an escape, a way to numb the pain, even if only temporarily. By the time Michael finally managed to free himself from addiction, he had lost almost everything. His wife had left him, taking their 2 children, unable to bear the strain of his repeated failures. The job he had always dreamed of, working for a well-known design firm, slipped through his fingers during one of his darkest periods. Life, it seemed, had already handed Michael a fate from which there was no return. Years later, he found himself in a modest apartment, working at a small auto repair shop on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. He had managed to stay clean for several years now, but the emptiness of his life weighed heavily on him. His only real connection to the world was through his neighbor, Daniel, a kind man who lived just down the street with his wife and 2 kids. Daniel had been a rock for Michael, encouraging him through his recovery and even helping him secure a job at the repair shop. That night, as Michael stood by the side of the road, looking at the woman struggling with her car, he could see a reflection of his past self, a person caught in a moment of need, hoping for someone to care. The woman, younger than him but rattled by the situation, glanced up as he approached. "Need some help?" Michael asked, his voice gentle but firm. The woman hesitated, her distrust evident. It was late, and she was alone on a quiet road. Michael could sense her hesitation, so he kept his distance, offering a small smile. "I know how frustrating these things can be. I can help with the tire if you'd like," he added. After a moment's pause, she nodded, still uncertain but grateful for the offer. Michael crouched down, working on the car jack while they exchanged small talk. The woman, Emma, explained that she had been returning from a friend's gathering when her tire blew out. As their conversation unfolded, Michael shared more about himself than he had in a long time. He told her about his job, about Daniel, and, though it surprised him, about the family he had lost, his wife, his children, and how addiction had stolen years of his life. Emma listened in silence, occasionally nodding as if she sensed the depth of the pain behind his words. She didn't pry into his past, but Michael could feel her understanding. In the quiet of the night, something shifted in him as he worked to replace her tire. There was a relief in telling someone, even a stranger, about the burdens he had carried for so long. When the task was done, Michael wiped his hands on his worn jeans and smiled at Emma. "All set," he said. She thanked him, her gratitude sincere. And as she drove off into the night, Michael felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of purpose. However small, he had helped someone, and in doing so, he had helped himself. Driving home after helping Emma, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. His hands gripped the steering wheel as his mind wandered, reflecting on their conversation. He hadn't meant to talk about his past. It wasn't something he shared quickly, even with the few people in his life. But there was something about Emma's quiet presence that drew it out of him. Maybe it was the late hour or the fact that she was a stranger he would likely never see again. As he pulled into the driveway of his small home, Michael realized he had missed his favorite TV show. Usually, this would bother him. His evenings were predictable, and he liked it that way. But tonight felt different. Instead of disappointment, he felt an unusual sense of fulfillment. Helping Emma, even in such a small way, gave him a sense of connection, a momentary break from the isolation that had defined so much of his life. Before going inside, he paused momentarily, staring at the night sky. The stars were faint, hidden behind the city's glow, but he could still see them. In that quiet, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, his life wasn't as empty as he had once believed. The following day, Michael was up early, the events from the previous night still lingering in his mind. It was his day off, and he spent the morning working out in the yard, tidying up the garden, and taking care of minor repairs around the house. The routine helped him clear his thoughts, but the sense of change still hovered at the edge of his consciousness. Later that afternoon, just as he was settling into the worn armchair in his living room, there was a knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but persistent. Michael frowned, not expecting anyone. Daniel was at work, and he rarely had visitors. The knock came again, and with a sigh, Michael rose to answer it. When he opened the door, his eyes widened in surprise. Standing before him was a man in an expensive-looking suit, his posture confident but non-threatening. Behind him, a sleek black SUV was parked in the driveway, with two men standing by its doors, their eyes scanning the quiet neighborhood. "You must be Michael," the man said, calm but authoritative. "Ah, yes, I'm Michael. Can I help you?" Michael responded, his mind racing to understand why this man was there. The man extended his hand. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I'm here on behalf of my younger sister, Emma." Hearing Emma's name, Michael's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected to see her again, let alone to have her send someone to his door. Ethan smiled, sensing Michael's confusion, and pulled out his phone. "My sister couldn't stop talking about how you helped her last night. Your kindness incredibly moved her. You reminded her of someone important to us, our late father." Michael stood frozen, unsure of what to say. Ethan handed him a white envelope, and Michael immediately felt its weight. His hands trembled as he opened it and saw a thick stack of bills inside. His breath caught in his throat. No, I can't accept this," Michael stammered, trying to push the envelope back into Ethan's hands. "All I did was help her change a tire." Ethan smiled, gently pushing the envelope back. "And all she wants is to thank you for your kindness properly. Please don't say no. It would mean a lot to her." For a moment, Michael stood there, overwhelmed. Tears welled in his eyes, and he hugged Ethan tightly before he could stop himself. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Please tell Emma how much I appreciate this." But it wasn't necessary. Helping her was enough. Ethan stepped back, his expression warm. "Don't worry, Michael. My sister will be back to thank you in person when she returns from her trip abroad. She was so insistent that I come here today." As Ethan prepared to leave, he hesitated momentarily, then turned back to Michael with a smile. "One more thing," he said. "Emma mentioned that you once dreamed of working at Silverstone Enterprises. I've spoken to the management there, and there's an opening with 3 months of training included. I've put in a good word for you." Michael's heart skipped a beat. His dream, the job he thought he had lost forever, was suddenly within reach. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Instead, tears spilled down his cheeks, and he let them flow freely this time. "Thank you," Michael choked out, his voice barely audible. I don't even know what to say." Ethan smiled again, his eyes kind. "Just say yes. We'll need your resume by the end of the week." As Ethan and the men in the SUV drove away, Michael stood in his driveway, staring after them in disbelief. The world seemed to shift around him. The life he had resigned himself to living suddenly expanding with new possibilities. For months later, Michael's life would be transformed in ways he had never imagined. But at that moment, all he could do was stand in awe of the kindness that had come back to him in a form far more significant than he ever expected. For months later, Michael's life had completely turned around. With the financial support from Emma and his new job at Silverstone Enterprises, he could leave behind the small, lonely house that had once seemed like a prison. He moved into a cozy, sunlit home in a quiet, friendly neighborhood, a place that felt more like the future he had once dreamed of. But the transformation wasn't just in his surroundings. Michael's heart felt lighter. For the first time in years, he had a sense of purpose, of belonging. The walls he had built around himself, the barriers that had kept him isolated, were beginning to crumble. His job at Silverstone Enterprises gave him financial stability and the confidence he had lost over the years. He was good at what he did, and he felt seen and valued for the first time in decades. However, what meant the most to Michael was that he didn't face this new chapter alone. Michael's bond with Ethan and Emma grew stronger with time. They treated him not just as a friend, but as family. Emma visited frequently, often bringing meals or simply stopping by to chat. They would talk for hours about life, dreams, and the things that mattered. She never judged him for his past, but instead seemed to admire the strength it had taken for him to survive. Ethan also became a steady presence in Michael's life, helping him navigate the professional world he once thought was beyond his reach. Together, the siblings filled a void Michael had long accepted as permanent. They had become the family he had lost and treated him with kindness and respect he hadn't felt in years. Through it all, Michael never forgot about Daniel. His loyal friend had been by his side through the darkest times. And now, with his life finally coming together, Michael made sure to bring Daniel and his family along for the journey. When he moved to his new home, Daniel and his family moved into a house just a few doors down. It was more than Michael could have hoped for, having his closest friend nearby and feeling the warmth of true friendship daily. As the months passed, Michael often reflected on how a single act of kindness had set off this remarkable chain of events. He thought back to that night on the side of the road, the flat tire, the simple offer to help. It had felt so ordinary at the time, but looking back, it was as if the universe had been waiting for him to take that small step. Kindness, Michael realized, had a ripple effect. It started small, but grew larger with every person it touched. In helping Emma, he hadn't just changed her night. He had unknowingly opened the door to a new chapter of his own life. It was a lesson he carried with him every day that deepened his appreciation for the unexpected blessings life sometimes had in store. The relationship Michael formed with Emma and Ethan wasn't just built on gratitude or obligation. It was built on a shared understanding of what it meant to be lost and found again. Together, they laughed, shared stories, and made new memories. They became a family in the truest sense of the word. As Michael's new life took shape, he often found himself grateful for everything he had been given. The years of struggle, pain, and loneliness had felt endless, but they had also shaped him into the man he had become. His past didn't define him, but it gave him the strength to appreciate the second chance he had been offered. Sitting in his new home, surrounded by the people who now meant the most to him, Michael felt a sense of peace he hadn't known was possible. It wasn't just the material comforts or the success of his new job. It was the knowledge that he had finally found his place in the world, that he was no longer alone. Michael often reminded himself that it was kindness that had started it all. He realized that extending kindness to others usually returns in ways you could never predict. Life had a way of surprising you, of giving you gifts you didn't know you deserved. As time passed, Michael's life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. One evening, after a long day at work, he received a phone call from Emma. Her voice was excited, full of the energy that had become familiar to him over the months. "Michael, I've been thinking," she said. "There's a project I'd like us to work on together. I want to create a foundation that helps struggling people like you once were. We can offer them a second chance, just like you got." The idea filled Michael with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The thought of helping others, of paying forward the kindness he had received, felt like the natural next step in his journey. Together, He and Emma began laying the groundwork for the foundation, envisioning a place where people could find hope, support, and a path toward rebuilding their lives. Once one of despair and loss, Michael's story had now become one of redemption, purpose, and transformation. He had gone from a man broken by his past to a man driven by hope for the future. As he looked at the world before him, Michael knew his story was far from over. The best chapters were still to come, and they would be filled with the same kindness, compassion, and hope that had saved him all those months ago. Michael's journey reminds us that even the most minor acts of kindness can have far-reaching effects. From the moment he stopped to help a stranded stranger on the side of the road, his life began to change in ways he could never have imagined, overcoming a painful past of abuse, addiction, and loss. Michael found not only redemption, but also a sense of purpose and belonging through the connections he made with Emma and Ethan. Their kindness transformed his life, opening doors to new opportunities and relationships that brought him true happiness. The story is a powerful reminder that life can surprise us when we least expect it. By extending kindness to others, we brighten their lives and create pathways for our own growth and transformation. Michael's new beginning shows that it's never too late to rewrite your story, and that the most critical changes often come from moments of compassion and connection. If this story moved you, consider how a small act of kindness can make a difference in someone else's life, and possibly your own. Whether helping a stranger, reaching out to a friend in need, or simply listening, your actions can ripple out in ways you can't foresee. If you enjoyed this video, please tap that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like Michael's. Let us know in the comments what this story made you feel, and share any moments of kindness that have changed your life. While you're here, check out the following video on your screen for another heartwarming tale of transformation. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness always finds its way back.